Alex C. I have some familiarity with customer relationship management systems, having worked for various banks over the years. I've heard Scientology uses a computer system called Central Addresso to manage electronic customer records. Is it a good system, or is it as disjointed and flawed as the rest of the church? Did it help or hinder your work? All right. So Central Addo, or the Central Files system, is something that has existed in paper form back in the day through card files and through folders in file cabinets. This was the original database of customers that every org was expected to keep, and they kept them in file cabinets, and this was just a filing system. This was the original concept of the central files. And every org was supposed to keep, and does keep, file cabinets with the alphabetical name and address of every single person who has ever purchased anything from that organization. So here you are in Keokuk, and Keokuk has had, has been around as an organization for 20 years. It has sold, I don't know, let's say it's sold 1,000 books a year. So it's sold 20,000 books. So it's got 20,000 individual file folders with the name and address of every single person who ever bought one of those books. Let's just say that happened, right? It might have also, that org also over those years didn't just sell those books. It also sold services, courses, auditing, training. And so those people who ever signed up for any of that have a file folder in the central files, and in that file folder is a copy of every invoice that they have ever had with the organization. So you have a treasury folder that has invoices for each week, and they're sort of, cross-indexed and sorted over in treasury. But central files is in division 2, the promotion and marketing and dissemination and sales division of Scientology. That's where CF is located. And division 2. And CF, or Central Files, is supposed to be this hard copy of everything the person's purchased, every letter that ever gets written to that person, a CC or a carbon copy of that letter goes in the folder, or is supposed to. Surveys the person fills out, letters they write back to the organization. If they ever send any checks or any money or any letters into the org, those go into the central files. Obviously, the checks get cashed, but a record of it goes into the central file. So the idea with the central file is you can pull out the folder, open it up, go through it, and kind of get an idea of who this person is and why they're connected to the organization and what they've done. And it's not a pre-clear folder. It's not their auditing. That's a different folder that's kept in a locked up place. And that doesn't have, you can have a PC folder with all the auditing worksheets and confessionals and OW write-ups and all that. But that doesn't have their address. That doesn't have letters they wrote. That doesn't have services they've purchased. It just has a running record of their auditing. So the pre-clear folder is a different thing. The central file folder is supposed to be, Hubbard said it was the body, is sort of the proxy body of the person. It's who they are and their relationship with the organization. And so when you write letters to people every week, you're supposed to pull the central file folder and actually go through it and look at it and read it and get familiar with who this person is, so you're not just writing random drivel to people. Now, this was through the I think this was really started to be developed in the late 50s, early 60s. And by the 1970s, this was a thing. Every organization had a central files set up and had these file folders for every one of their customers. Come around the 1980s, and we start talking about Scientology computerizing some of its actions and some of its setup. And by the 2000s, they were starting to computerize the central file system. I mean, it is a database system. It lends itself immediately to, going into be a database type setup. And they were scanning with digital scanners. They started scanning all of the existing central files folders and putting them into this digital system. They still keep the hard copy files. It's a dual system now. The computer did not replace the central files. It just sort of was picked up and created in order to be able in order for call centers to be built or created so that people could sit at a desk and not have to go pull files, but could just pull up the digital file, flip through the letters, flip through the invoices, see what this person has done. The computer program also had other information on the person, like their case level, how far up the bridge they'd gone, how much training they had done. Different kinds of information about them would also go into the system so that they could be called and sold more Scientology books and materials, or better even come in and do services. So that system was something I messed around with a little bit when I was doing some call center work. And it was okay. I mean, as a call center program, it's fine. It even has a whole little pattern, a call script that would come up when you would be doing calls and stuff. So they integrated the central files, digital files, with a sort of sales system that walked you through a pattern and walked you through what to say to people and how to sell them stuff. And that was based on exactly the kind of, customer service software that you probably use in writing me this question, because Scientology looked at customer management and customer service software and in putting their stuff together. And it was, like I said, it was okay. It was a decent system. It wasn't anything, awesome or incredible, but it worked kind of. And the bigger problem is that with the central files over the years, they weren't really kept up very well. The people who kept up central files were always the people who could be spared, and they didn't necessarily have great spelling skills, great administrative skills, great filing skills. Stuff gets misfiled all the time, both computer-wise and hard copy-wise. Or, these things were around for decades, these central files. So, and still are. So you see a number of errors and problems in them: duplicate files, bad addresses, bad status, bad information. Like, for example, when I went out to Twin Cities, I was doing, door-to-door recovery. I was knocking on people's doors and I was saying, "Hi, I've got your name on a list." Well, that list came from central files, came from Central Addresso. And it had their name and their address and their phone numbers that we had on file, and it had their case level and their training level and what they had done. So I would use these lists and I would go knock on people's doors, and many, many times I'd knock on a door and say, "Hi, you're Joe Smith, and I'm Chris, and I'm here from the Church of Scientology, and I'm here. I understand you did, a bunch of training. You're a Class 4 auditor, and I'm here to talk to you about Scientology again, right?" And this person would look at me and just, I can't tell you how many times this happened. They'd just be like, "Dude, I bought a book at a swap meet like 30 years ago, and you people have never left me alone since." And that's it. That's all the person did. They bought a copy of Dianetics 30 years ago. But somehow, in that 30 years, some bright bulb somewhere put in that guy's file that he was a trained auditor, and which means he'd been deeply and very much involved in Scientology. And so the assumption was, when I'm knocking on his door, that I'm talking to a guy who really has read Keeping Scientology Working, probably been to events, has audited people. This is a guy who's going to know what I'm talking about when I start talking about Scientology. And instead, I'm sitting there talking to some guy who bought a book, and we just will never let this guy alone. So that happened a lot. Okay. In fact, I can give you some numbers. I think, if I'm remembering this right, when I was out in Twin Cities, which is where I did the majority of that kind of work, I had a list of 900 names of Scientologists in that area, in the 5-state area around Twin Cities. And we called every single one of those names. And it turned out that easily at least a third of them were just total bullshit. Just total, never did Scientology, never wanted to do Scientology, didn't have anything to do with it, didn't really, wasn't what it said on the list, like the book buyer who was labeled as an auditor. So these systems were sort of, the computer system is okay, but the information base on which it is using, right, is awful. It's riddled with wrong information. And this is why they have been working for decades now, we can say, trying to correct all this and get this all fixed. And this is why their skip tracing and all their address correction and all that stuff is working so overtime, is they're literally fixing all those errors and crap from all those decades. So anyway, so that's the system. Hope you find that kind of interesting. And that's how Scientology reaches out and touches people now.